Hello, this is John Quinlan, and welcome to Forward Forum. We're taping the show on April 21st, 2015, here at the Sun Prairie Media Center. And I'm very pleased to have in studio a longtime friend and colleague, Norm Stockwell. And Norm is here for a couple of purposes today. In our first segment, we'll be talking about an amazing event that's happening on a national scale with a concert that's happening here in Madison. And it's something to honor a labor activist named Joe Hill, who passed away almost exactly 100 years ago. And Norm will have a chance to tell us more about the extent of Joe's activism, why this is such a significant event with so much resonance for so many of the people involved. And also a chance to kind of preview the concert in the sense of hearing some of the songs of folks who will be singing at the concert. Hey, Norm Stockwell, welcome to Forward Forum.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be here with you.
Good to have you here. Norm, if you could just start at a very basic place, tell us a little about who Joe Hill is and how all this became this opportunity for a nationwide series of concerts.
Joe Hill was an immigrant from Sweden. He came to the United States, worked a lot of odd jobs, learned English, and eventually became a labor organizer, activist, also journalist, cartoonist, and songwriter.
Wow.
And he would travel across the country, went west where the workers were organizing in the early part of the 20th century, and would write songs for the organizing drives. And a lot of those songs today are still classics of American labor.
And in a minute, we'll share a song that was actually written about Joe Hill and his storied career and rather interesting life. Now, without giving too much away here, I mean, part of his story was essentially sort of a murder mystery. Is that right? Or?
Well, yeah. He was accused of a murder and eventually executed by a firing squad in Utah, November 19th, 1915. And so that occasions this, the centenary of his death this year in 2015, and a national tour of artists performing the songs of Joe Hill together with contemporary labor songs, and sort of sharing that history and the legend and legacy of Joe Hill.
So it's a long list of cities where the concert will be occurring. I know it culminates, or anyway, one of the later concerts is actually in Salt Lake City.
That's right. That's right. The tour starts in Chicago for May Day. Mm-hmm. May Day, of course, the working people's holiday that started in 1886 with the March for the 8-Hour Day. And then the concert will travel through the Midwest. We have several spots here in Wisconsin, and then heading on to other parts of the country. There'll be a northeast leg, there'll be a west coast leg, and culminating in Salt Lake City on the 19th and 20th of November for the 100th anniversary of Joe Hill's death.
And we'll try to punctuate this throughout the time, but the details on what's happening here in Madison?
Well, here in Madison, Wisconsin, on Wednesday, May 6th from 7 to 9 at the Barrymore Theater, a series of national touring artists, part of this tour, and also local musicians that are going to join in. And so we'll have a bunch of different folks doing, again, one song from Joe Hill, one of their own, and then the audience will be invited to join in as well. And there's a lot of special things that have been created for this 100th anniversary, including a calendar, a songbook, T-shirts, and so those will be available as well.
And we'll give people a sampling of this, but if you just Google Joe Hill, I mean, you're just going to come up with a plethora of songs and background materials and other things. So,
song after song. And of course, Joe Hill was a member of the Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW, and that IWW songbook, which is still maintained today. It's new versions of it are still coming out. Has a whole bunch of Joe Hill songs in it. John McCutcheon, another well-known artist, is touring around the country this year with a new CD he just produced of Joe Hill songs. Bucky Hawker, who's going to be one of the performers in Madison, has a new CD of Joe Hill songs coming out this year. And then there's a play about the life of Joe Hill that's been put together by musician Cy Kahn, and that'll be touring around the country with John McCutcheon. So just a lot of stuff happening on the cultural front to commemorate this really Renaissance man. You know, Joe Hill was, as I said, you know, an artist, a journalist, a songwriter, and a labor organizer.
So let's go back to 1915, the years that preceded, some of the highlights of his life. One piece of context, I guess, is for folks who may not be familiar with this history. What was the IWW, also known as the Wobblies? Is that right?
Yeah, the IWW was a radical labor union, started in 1905. And the notion was, instead of the kind of separation of trades into different unions, the IWW was built on the model of one big union. So everybody was a member of the same union. And what that meant is you wouldn't have a situation where the workers in the factory were on strike, but the truck drivers weren't, so they were still delivering to the scab workers inside the factory. And so the idea of the IWW was the idea of all workers being part of one big union and the general strike as a tool to bring about change. And the IWW was the first union to admit immigrant workers, people of color, and women on the same footing as white workers. And that was very unusual at that time, where you had separate organizations, where white workers only would be in certain trade unions. And so the IWW was a radical departure from the traditional forms of unionism in this country.
Where did the term Wobblies come from? Do you know, Raphael?
I think the wobbly was originally kind of a derogatory term, but it was adopted and owned, much like the term Obamacare was eventually adopted by President Obama.
Or queer for the LGBT community.
Wobbly because of the W in the name. So IWW sounded like I wobbly, and that was where the phrase first came out.
Just one other piece of context, again, for folks that maybe aren't historically oriented or don't necessarily know this piece of history. But I'm doing a lot of radio shows, and I think you probably have two of that era, those early decades of the 1900s, and did a show on the Titanic, remarking on that being a gilded age, and we're sort of living through another time where folks with wealth and power, are seizing control, and the people are trying to seize back, control over our lives. But do you see parallels between that La Follette era, early period of this century, and all those things that were happening, in the here and now?
Very much so. I think, if you look back here in the state of Wisconsin, historically, the Wisconsin state legislature of 1911 was an incredibly progressive state legislature pushing through reforms, most of the national labor reforms that we have in the United States today. Workers' compensation, child labor laws, these all came out of Wisconsin, and they came out of these struggles in the early years where progressive voices were saying, we need to create a system that's more fair to more people. And so here we are 100 years later, reliving many of those same struggles right here in the same state of Wisconsin.
And I would imagine this is why there's such enthusiasm for recapturing the story of someone's life who lived a century ago.
Well, yeah, and of course, as my friend and someone you know as well, political folk singer Dave Lippman, often says, those that forget the lessons of the past are given the opportunity to repeat them. What we want to do with this tour, I think, is remember the life and legacy of this very important figure, Joe Hill, but also kind of look at those lessons for today and the struggles of today and how does that apply. The issues of immigrant workers, very, very prominent in our conversations in the United States today in 2015, just as they were 100 years ago in 1915. The rights of working people to organize unions, again under threat today in 2015 as it was in 1915. So those struggles and those lessons and those tactics and ideas from 100 years ago are still very vibrant today.
Just a quick aside, you'll appreciate this as a radio interviewer. The last time I think I interviewed Dave Lippman was on April Fool's Day. You're already talking to somebody who speaks ironically, and you never quite know what to take seriously and what is ironic. And anyway, that was a very interesting interview that day. But But Dave Lippman, again, being along with a long list of other people that you mentioned, these are all folks. Again, it sounds like we're really touched by the life, the history of Joe Hill, and I think just to give our viewers a bit of a sense of that, we have a video. It's based in the backdrop on a song that was written by Phil Oakes, sung by Billy Bragg, and kind of a montage of images. The lyrics of the song itself, I think, kind of evokes some of the history we're talking about.
There's two great songs about the life of Joe Hill. The first one, I Dreamed I Saw Joe Hill Last Night. Lyrics by Alfred Hayes, music by Earl Robinson. That was very, very famous. Phil Oakes in the 1960s was a political folk singer, but he was also a voracious reader. And he loved history, and he particularly loved the histories of struggles. And he read the story of the life of Joe Hill, and he put together this song that we're about to hear. I think it was 1968 he wrote this, 67 or 68, maybe 67. And he took an old tune, John Hardy, which was a famous folk tune that told the story of another working man, and he adapted that to the story of the life of Joe Hill. And this song that we're going to hear is performed by Billy Bragg. Billy Bragg, a contemporary British political folk singer who was very much influenced by both Phil Oakes and the British Miners' Union. Billy Bragg actually was politicized by the struggle of the British miners in the mid-1980s and the work of Ewan McCall and Peggy Seeger. So here we have Billy Bragg honoring Phil Oakes with the song about the life of Joe Hill 100 years earlier.
All right. Well, I think we'll take a moment and listen to about 5 minutes of this story of Joe Hill.
Joe Hill came over from Sweden's shore, looking for some work to do, and the Statue of Liberty waved him by as Joe came sailing through. Joe Hill, as Joe came sailing through. Oh, his clothes were coarse and his hopes were high as he headed for the promised land. And it took a few weeks on the out-of-work streets before he began to understand. Before he began to understand. Then he got hired by a Bowery bar, sweeping up in a saloon. As his rag would sail over the barroom rail, it sounded like he whistled on a tune. You could almost hear him whistling on a tune. And Joe rode on from job to job, the docks to the railroad line. And no matter how hungry and had that load, in his letters he was always doing fine. In his letters he was always doing fine. And the years went by like the sun going down, slowly turned the page. And when Joe looked back at the sweat upon his tracks, he had nothing to show but his age. He had nothing to show but his age. So he headed out to the California shore, but there things were just as bad. So he joined the industrial workers of the world, 'cause the union was the only friend he had. Oh, the union was the only friend he had. And the strikes were bloody and the strikes were black, as hard as they were long. In the dark of the night, Joe would stay awake and write. In the morning he would wake them with a song. In the morning he would wake them with a song. And he wrote his words to the tunes of the day, to be passed along the Union line. And the strikes were laid and the songs were spread, and Joe Hill was always on the line. And Joe Hill was always on the line.
And again, that was the song about Joe Hill. Norm Stockwell is our guest for those of you just joining us, and there's an amazing concert event that's happening here in Madison, part of a larger national tour. And Norm, let's remind our viewers of some of the details of what's happening.
Well, the national tour kicks off in Chicago on May 1st, and it's including a bunch of folks that are going to be traveling around the country, and the tour divides into different legs. So the Midwest leg will include Ann Feeney, Jan Hammerland, Bucky Hawker, Lil Rev, J.P. Wright, and then in each city a bunch of local folks joining in. So here we're going to have David H.B. Drake, Stephen Lee Rich, David Sewell, along with the Solidarity Sing-Along Singers and the Forward Marching Band. So a real Madison flavor. The show in Madison is at the Barrymore Theater, which is 2090 Atwood Avenue in Madison, 608-241-2345 for ticket information. It'll be...
It's BarrymoreLive.
BarrymoreLive.com is their website, and it'll be a great evening, I think. Everybody's going to be doing some Joe Hill music and some of their own music, so it'll be, again, looking back at that history, but looking forward at today as well. And there'll be a lot of space for the audience to sing along. There's a special song sheet that's being produced that'll have songs for the audience to join in.
Now, with a cast of characters like this, I was joking earlier, I mean, this isn't going to be like a 5 or 6 hour concert, right?
No, it's everybody's going to do one Joe Hill song,
Right.
one of their own, and then the last part of the evening will be a chance for everybody to sing along, and folks can stay as late as they want, but I would guess we'll be out of there in a couple hours.
But what an amazing musical montage in terms of a full diversity of artists that are going to be represented. And what we're going to try to do today is to give some samplings of some of the repertoire of some of these artists, give people a sense of what to expect. We should mention there was a national website. I think we've been placing that with your title.
We have a website not only for this tour, but for the whole centenary of the death of Joe Hill. It's called joehill100.com. And in addition to information about this national tour, what we call the Joe Hill Roadshow, there's also stuff about other exhibits. There's information about this calendar that I mentioned, the songbook that's coming out, and other various events happening around the country.
All right. Well, we want to, again, go through some clips of different artists. We start with Ann Feeney. I think I explained to you, there was another clip that we wanted to show. We had some technical problems, but the story behind it, I think, is significant. Ann Feeney visited in the hospital room of a good friend of ours, Clarence Kalin, who's, I think, was it 95 at the time, roughly? This was several years ago, and she sang this song, "Have You Been to Jail for Justice?" Also reminiscent of the show we just did with Bonnie Block, who did go to jail for justice, in protesting drone warfare. Can you remember, share some memories of that day? And
Ann is a great friend of Madison and of working people here in Madison. She's been here many, many times performing at various labor events, both on the picket line and off. And in this particular case, she went to the nursing home where Clarence Kalin was living at the time. Clarence, lifetime activist for social justice, fought in Spain in the Spanish Civil War and continued his struggles here in Madison, working for social justice, racial justice, economic justice, and for peace. The Madison chapter of Veterans for Peace is named for Clarence Kalin, and he was there in the room, and Ann came to visit, and he said, "Well, can you play a song?" And she said, "Well, yeah, I just happen to have my guitar." And she pulled out her guitar and played that song, "Have You Been to Jail for Justice?" which is her tribute to people that stand up for what they believe in. We mentioned Cy Khan earlier, and Cy Khan was here, and actually he wrote a song for Clarence, which he performed there for Clarence as well. So just a lot of good memories, I think, around the idea of honoring these people that have been so important in working for change in our society.
And you and I were, I helped produce and host a show that you were a guest on last year. Interesting piece of synergy that Clarence Kalin and Joe Hill, I guess, must have overlapped by a few months, but we were celebrating the 100th anniversary of Clarence's birth last year.
That's right.
And so important stuff. And wartfm.org is a place where you can go into the archives, and you'll find that show and a whole lot of other things, I'm sure, over the years about Clarence. Well, let's again move into this clip with Ann Feeney. I tried to find there's just, again, with all of these artists, if you go to YouTube and do a search, as in the case with Ann, I think there were 100 and some songs up, in different venues and other things. I tried to find one that is a bit of an eclectic collection of her songs. And Mara, we may play this one out just a little bit longer than the other clips, but I think you may help me recognize the context and other things. But let's hear a little now from Ann Feeney.
So I'll sing this. This is a little remnant from my. In 1973, working for the Equal Rights Amendment in the United States, before we had this gynecological crystal women's feminist movement full of women's music. When people ask of me, what would you like to be? Now that you're not a kid anymore? I know just what to say. Right away. There's just one thing that I'm looking for. I wanna be Bobby's girl. I wanna be Bobby's girl. Yes, that's the personal career goal I've defined for my life in the 21st century. If I was Bobby's girl, if I was Bobby's girl, oh, what a faithful, thankful girl I'd be. Since you touched my hand, I knew near him I always must be. Nothing will keep him from me. He is my destiny. Yeah, that's what he is. I love it, I love it, I love it. There he goes. I'll follow. Johnny get angry, Johnny get mad. Give me the biggest lecture I ever had. I want a brave man. I want a caveman? They made poor Joni Summers sing, I want a caveman. To add insult to injury, the song had a...
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. She seems like amazing.
Yeah, I mean, Ann's great because yes, she's a very committed political artist, and she'll be right at the front of the picket line. But she does it with a sense of humor and makes it fun. And so it's not some boring song that we all have to sing. It's let's enjoy ourselves as we are struggling to make the world a better place.
All right. Well, let's work our way further down this list of amazing performers. Bucky Hawker?
Yeah, Bucky Hawker, this is a great story. He's from Wisconsin, which is where the nickname Bucky comes from, but he's been down in Chicago for a number of years, and great labor singer, but also a rock and roller. And so we'll see some of Bucky here.
All right. Bucky Hawker with a rendition, Born to Run.
Chevrolet with a 396 and a 4-barrel car. That was nice. But then, I had 14 people in it one night, and I drove over a railroad crossing and broke the frame. We weren't hunting and we weren't fishing, so. There's a tradition in northern Wisconsin called drunk driving, which you all should know about. I mean, when you mix it with mushrooms, you have particular problems. So there you go. Are you ready? That's a good intro, isn't it? Yes. Got a 69 Chevy with a 396, friendly hitters and alerts on the floor. She's waiting the night parking lot outside the 7-Eleven store. Me and my partner, Sonny, built her straight out of scratch, and she rides with me from town to town. We only run for the money, got no strings attached. We shoot 'em up and then we shut 'em down. Well, tonight the strip's just right. I wanna blow 'em out in my first heat. 'Cause summer's here and the time is right for racing in the streets. Take all the action we can get and we cover all of these states. When the strip shuts down, we run 'em in the streets, from the fire roads to the interstate. Some guys, they just give up living. They start dying little by little, piece by piece. Some guys come home from work and wash up, they go racing in the streets. Tonight the strip's just right. I wanna blow 'em off in my first heat. They're calling you drivers all around the world, racing in the streets.
Yeah, that was Bucky Hawker with Born to Run.
And for all the Springsteen fans out there, that's not Born to Run, that's
Yeah.
Racing in the Street.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
That's what I thought it said on YouTube. Okay, well, messed that up. All right, good. So Jan Hammarlund is another one of the artists. I was telling you, part of the challenge is Jan is from Sweden, and I couldn't find a whole lot of English language selections.
Right, and we should mention, this year in Sweden, there's a huge Joe Hill commemoration
'Cause he is from
going
Sweden,
on as
if
well.
we haven't
He's
said
from
that.
Sweden. He's
Yeah.
a Swedish immigrant, and so there's a series of concerts going on in Sweden right now as we speak. And Jan Hammarlund is going to be in Chicago this weekend at the Haymarket Memorial, which is the monument to the 4 Haymarket martyrs who were killed in 1886.
Right.
And he's going to be doing a rendition of the Internationale in Swedish at the monument there. So that'll be this weekend for anybody who's down in Chicago.
And Jan, even though he is from Sweden, he's a pervasive performer from what I can tell in this country.
Yes, oh yeah, very much so. And is connected with Ann Feeney and will be traveling with her on this tour. And it should be a great evening, and I think we'll be treated to some really fine music.
If you go to Ann Feeney's YouTube site, there was a great rendition the two of them did together of Heavy Men Did Yell for Justice. So a lot of different selections here. As I said, I wanted to share with our audience preferably an English language version, although he may actually be performing in Swedish. Is that possible?
Well, he'll probably do some of both.
A little bit of both? Okay. Well, this is a song called Free Enterprise, and we'll play you about a minute. It's a YouTube video, but it's kind of a static shot, but nonetheless, you can get a sense of the flavor of Jan Hammarlund's music.
The air you breathe is poison, the food you eat is worse. The dollars in your paycheck are pennies in your purse. In full-page advertisements, they praise it to the skies. They tie it up with fancy bows and dress it up in fancy clothes. It still offends the gentle nose. Free enterprise, free enterprise. It's free enough, no doubt. Anything they give away, you're better off without. The bandits of the old.
Yeah, that was Jan Hammarlund, and I mentioned on the screen Melvina Reynolds.
Right,
so
so that was her song. That was her
Yeah.
song, and Malvina Reynolds, a wonderful, wonderful performer, passed away several years ago now, but used to be a regular feature here in Madison. She was good friends with Kay, who ran OK's Corral back in the day, and she would perform here. And she actually wrote a song here in Madison about Judge Archie Simonson while she was here.
So 1977, this infamous case in which he sort of implied that a woman who'd been a victim of rape was somehow responsible because of her provocative dress, which was just outrageous. And the guy was called out of office. So Movina actually wrote a song about it. Huh?
And she of course would be on this tour if she were living today. Again, a great example of what we call people's artists. You know, folks that are doing songs about the hopes and dreams and aspirations of everyday working people, trying to create change and make a better world.
So another example of that is Little Rev. Can you tell us a little about him?
Yeah, Lil Rev is he's from Milwaukee, and he tours all around the Midwest, and great guy and part of kind of a new generation of young artists keeping this tradition alive. And he's been very active in organizing for this national tour. We have a steering committee of people around the country that have been working on this for months and months, long conference calls on the phone, and different folks have taken on organizing different legs of the tour. So Lil Rev has done most of the Midwest organizing together with Bucky Hawker and George Mann out in the Northeast, and a lot of great folks working on this project, and great musicians as well as great organizers.
So in this case, we have a clip, I think it might be from either a house concert or just maybe something that was filmed at home, but a really wonderful rendition of one of my favorite songs, St. James Infirmary.
Let's go down to Basin Street, baby. 1, 2, 3. It was down in old Joe's barroom on a corner by the square. Drinks they were served as usual, and the usual crowd was there. On my left stood Big Joe McKennedy. His eyes they were bloodshot red. Looked at that gang all around him, and these were the words he said. I went down to that St. James Infirmary, saw my baby there, stretched out on a long white table, so cold, so pale, so fair. Let her go, God bless her, wherever she may be. Search this wide world all over, never find another man like me. Come on, get it, boy.
And again, that was Little Rev with St. James Infirmary. Let's move on then to, again, just a packed ensemble of performers that are going to be happening. Actually, just to punctuate again, the time.
So the show here in Madison is Wednesday, May 6th at 7 p.m. at the Barrymore Theater, 2090 Atwood Avenue. 608-241-2345 for ticket information, and also barrymorelive.com on the web. The whole tour kicks off in Chicago on May 1st and runs through November 20th out in Salt Lake City, and it's going to be an amazing tour, different in each venue. Each show is going to be its own special treat, so if you can get to a bunch of them, that's great too. The website, joehill100.com, has information about the tour. There's also a Facebook page. If you look up Joe Hill Roadshow on Facebook, you'll find it right away. And lots of information, photos, maps, things like that.
So the next artist we're going to hear from is J.P. Wright with a song called Railroad Man. Who's
right, J.P. Wright's a railroad worker by trade.
Okay.
He works in the industry, and for folks that remember Ron Kamenko, who used to live here in Madison, who's also a railroad worker, they're good buddies, and Ron is part of the national organizing committee that's been making this whole tour happen. And I think he's going to come out for the Madison show as well. But J.P. Wright's a good buddy of his and a fine musician.
All right, J.P. Wright with Railroad Man.
So God bless Amika Sanders, dispatcher ASS. I can sit right here for hours. I can pull 10,000 tons. And I know all the back ways into everything. And I'll be here to get the job done. I'm a railroad man. I'm a railroad man. Riding up on the train. I'm a railroad man. I'm a railroad man. Doing my part to build this land.
Again, J.P. Wright with Railroad Man.
And of course, the railroad's, you know, historically such an important part of the early days of union organizing, because folks would hop on the freight trains and head west, both to get the jobs and also organizers going out there to join the workforce and build a union. And so you have this whole tradition of hobo organizers, people
Yep.
that were riding the trains, but then getting off into town and organizing local unions. And that certainly was part of Joe Hill's tradition as well.
History, I think, played out a little bit later, but A. Philip Randolph and the Pullman Union for the Black Civil Rights Movement also
Absolutely,
important part.
absolutely.
Yeah.
A little bit later in the 20th century, the struggle of the black porters, and eventually A. Philip Randolph being on the stage at the March on Washington.
One of the
1963.
primary organizers. Yeah, absolutely. So our next artist, David H.P. Drake.
Another Milwaukeean and longtime Wisconsin performer in many, many different venues. He does kids stuff, he does stuff for grown-ups. You see him around the state quite a bit, and he's joining us for the Wisconsin leg of this national tour. Fine performer in his own right, and often performs with other folks as well.
This is dubbed on on YouTube, essentially Wisconsin, Two Rivers of Wisconsin. So let's take a sampling of David H.P. Drake.
Well, I'm going to sing you a song about the rivers of Wisconsin, and you'll hear some French names in this song because the French guys made the maps, and some Native American names because they were here first to name the places. And I'm going to play it on an instrument called a concertina. I crossed the broad flambeau, I portaged the fox, swum the little copper and followed the black. The sugar is muddy, the St. Croix is clear, down by the Eau Claire I ported my gear. Give me your hand. Give me your hand. Give me your hand. There's many a river that crosses our land. The sweet Chippewa flows glossy and gliding, crooked Rock River is weaving and winding. Old Wisconsin courses the plain. I never will walk by the Eau Claire again. Give me your hand. Give me your hand. Give me your hand. There's many a river that crosses our land.
Again, David H.P. Drake. We have one other artist we want to share, and then we want to talk about just a few of the other folks that we may have not been able to find some video to acquaint folks with. But David Sewell is another artist, and interestingly enough, I think this clip takes place in what's a very brave thing to do, an outdoor concert in the middle of winter in front of the Willie Street Co-op.
Yeah, a lot of people may recognize David Sewell as a regular feature out in front of the Willie Street Co-op. He's performed on State Street, and he's also been a session musician in Nashville. So he's really got a very fine career, and is a part of our community now here in Madison, and it's great to have him on this Madison performance section of the national tour. Also, a friend of his, Mo Hirsch, is going to perform with him as well on stage at the Barrymore on Wednesday, May 6th, at the show that starts at 7 p.m.
All right, David Sewell, his song "In the Pines."
Okay. In the pine. In the pine, where the sun never shines, I shiver when the cold wind blows. I'm the captain for the time of day, and he threw his watch away. So long, derail, short cross time, and I'm on my way back home. In the pine, where the sun never shines, and I shiver when the cold wind blows.
How that takes a lot of courage, you know, in
That's right.
front
It's
of
great.
Willie Street in the winter.
He's singing about when the cold winds blow in the pines, and there he is, wrapped to the hilt in the cold front of the Willie Street Co-op. David Sewell, who's going to be there with his friend Mo Hirsch at the Barrymore show on Wednesday, May 6th. We didn't have any video from Stephen Lee Rich, but another great performer, lives here in Madison, performs around. With his partner, and then also tours nationally, as well as performing right here in Madison. And then the kind of capstone of the evening will be the Solidarity Sing-Along Singers. They will be leading the crowd in singing along. Forward Marching Band is going to be on hand to march folks in and out. Another Madison original there, part of a national tradition of these marching bands connected with politics and protest. And then I should also mention there's going to be some spoken word. Marty Carine, who's a local union activist, longtime AFSCME member here in the Wisconsin area, and Martha Stahl, who's got a great career as a performing artist, both in stage and music, are going to be doing spoken word throughout the evening. So they'll be reading some of the poetry and some of the various sayings of Joe Hill sprinkled throughout the night. So it's going to be a great evening altogether. You'll really get a chance both to learn about the history and legacy of this great labor organizer and activist who was killed 100 years ago, November 19th, 1915, but also about all the connections between the movements of the early 20th century and the struggles of today.
It strikes me as you're talking about, for example, the important role of the Solidarity Sing-Along Singers, you know, at this event and everything else. For anybody who thinks that the Capitol uprising kind of faded into obscurity, is no longer living on in some sense, you know, I think an event like this, you know, and also the larger arc of history that it's connected to, the labor movement has not died. You know, the pendulum swings back and forth throughout history. But this tells us, you know, of the hope that we still have.
We've been doing events here in Madison around May Day for decades and commemorating the struggles of working people from 1886 all throughout our history. And this concert kind of falls in that tradition. And we said when we were booking this national tour, we said, it's got to be in Madison, and it's got to be at the Barrymore Theater, because that place is such a wonderful place and has come to be so well known for this kind of community-based music about working for change, working for a better world.
So, you know, again, invoking this earlier time, 100 years ago, and thinking, you know, as much of the exciting things that are happening, that progressive legislative history, the other things that you're talking about, have to be reminded that was also a time when folks are feeling discouraged, when the odds seemed overwhelming and everything. I mean, I think, again, to the extent that people are feeling that in the here and now, do you think those lessons of 100 years ago have resonance in the here and now about what we can achieve moving forward?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think that's what this is all about. It's about the spirit of creativity in organizing, which we saw 100 years ago with Joe Hill taking the old hymns and church songs and turning them into radical labor songs. And we have and of course also his work as an artist and a journalist. Fast forward to 2011 at the protests at the Wisconsin State Capitol and all of the tremendous creativity that we saw in the signs and the posters and the costumes that people wore. The idea of creatively communicating a message, using culture as a way to help people better understand a situation. That's what this kind of music is all about, and that's what this work is all about, is really communicating to people the possibilities and the alternatives and celebrating the hopes and dreams and aspirations of everyday working people for a world of peace and justice.
Let's punctuate one more time the details on this Madison concert.
So in Madison, Wisconsin, Wednesday, May 6th, 7 p.m. at the Barrymore Theater, 2090 Atwood Avenue, 608-241-2345 by phone, barrymorelive.com on the web. And again, just one piece of a national tour that kicks off in Chicago on May 1st, goes throughout the Midwest and then throughout the country, culminating November 19th and 20th in Salt Lake City, Utah. And we have a website for the national tour, along with a lot of other great information at joehill100, that's the number 100.com.
Norm Stockwell, it's been a great pleasure. It's been a lot of fun exploring all these clips and getting some sense of the energy of that evening that's going to be coming up on May 6th.
Thank you.
So thanks for joining us for this segment. We will bring you back in just a moment, wearing a different hat, a slightly different hat, in terms of your role as operations coordinator at WRT Community Radio. As we'll be discussing in just a moment, the Sun Prairie Media Center, where we're sitting, is embarking on an exciting new adventure, a new low-power radio station, which is really kind of on the cutting edge of providing community radio services. So you may have some insights to share, and we're going to be having a conversation in just a moment with Jeff Robbins, who's the director here. A little interplay, finding out some sharing of lessons and other things along the way. But thank you so much for telling us about this Joe Hill experience.
Thank you very much. I encourage people to come out. It should be a great fun time, and there'll be some take-homes too. There'll be some song sheets. There'll be, as I said, T-shirts and literature, and of course all the performers are going to bring their CDs as well.
Okay, John Quinlan here on Forward Forum. We're going to take just a bit of a break, reset the show, and we will be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Forward Forum. I'm your host, John Quinlan. In the interim, we've been joined by a third guest. We're joined once again by Norm Stockwell, the operations coordinator at WRT-FM. And also in studio now, Jeff Robbins, who is the director of the Sun Prairie Media Center. We noted this at the start of the show, but there's this interesting synergy happening in terms of what we're talking about and WART, and the fact that the Sun Prairie Media Center, Jeff, is about to embark on a new adventure, not just in television anymore, but moving into radio. Can you tell us about that?
Thank you, John. We're branching out into community radio. So sometime in July, we will be broadcasting our own low-power FM radio station, 103.5, The Sun Community Radio. So I'm here to encourage all your viewers, and I know we have a lot of viewers, both online and on air, to contact us with their programming ideas. We'd love to have volunteers come on to do talk shows, play music, play their favorite songs, and we're really excited about the added dimension of what community radio is going to bring to the media center. We think it's going to be a great service for Sun Prairie. And Norm, do you have any tips for me starting up a community radio station?
Well, I mean, community radio is such a wonderful, wonderful medium, because really it gives people a chance to tell their own stories. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think that's so important today. You know, so much of our culture is this consumer culture where we have the experts that stand up there and they sell us our culture, and we the people consume it. And here, community radio is about people making their own culture, people making their own media. And so it's a wonderful thing. And the synergy, I think, that you guys have here of having a media center already in place and adding the dimension of radio is just wonderful.
Yeah, anybody familiar with us doesn't have to go anywhere different. It'll be the studio will be right here at the media center, and we'll be repurposing some of our television programs on the radio, but hopefully we'll have some new exciting original programming on the radio as well.
So as we preview this, just to give folks a taste of what community radio is about, and at the core, it's about volunteers who do their own programs, just as you've been doing in the realm of TV. And toward that end, those of you who don't know, I cut my teeth on alternative media and working at WART, going back to about 1985 or 86, but more recently co-hosting or being one of the hosts of a show called Public Affairs. So give you a little bit of a montage of some of the work we're doing. We're seeing right now the front of the WART studios over at 118 South Bedford Street. And
now, Norm, you were telling me earlier that you have how many volunteers with WART?
We have over 300 volunteers that do every aspect of the programming. So all the voices you hear on the air at WORT are community volunteers coming in, sharing of their knowledge and their passion about particular topics, particular kinds of music. And
so I'm challenging our viewers. We're trying to get over 400 volunteers.
That's an ambitious goal.
How long did it take you to get up to over 300?
Well, WRT is just about 40 years old.
Right.
We started December 1st, 1975, so this is our 40th year right now, and it's been great. I mean, it's really wonderful to see, and people that start out. We like to use the model of taking people from wherever they are to wherever they want to go. So if you come in and you want to learn how to read the news, if you want to learn how to write the news, if you want to learn how to edit audio, we'll take you through those steps and give you those tools to actually be able to make your own media, and that's what this kind of programming is about.
Somebody comes into WART, as people come into the Sun Prairie Media Center, somebody comes into WART with no technical knowledge of any sort. They just know they want to do something on air. You can help that person.
Yeah, we have a volunteer program with a volunteer coordinator who helps place people with the particular show that they want to work with, and you develop your relationships and your skills as you go.
Well, Norm, this is part of a larger context. Community radio as a national phenomenon, an international phenomenon, and so Amara, maybe if we could just jump ahead to some of the photos of Norm in action. One of the places you traveled several continents, I think, working on this and helping other community radio stations get started.
That's true. I've been at WRT for over 30 years. I've been involved with an international community radio organization called AMARC, the World Association of Community Broadcasters, for almost that long. And one of the things that we do is support community radios around the globe. In the United States, of course, there's a great tradition of the building of low power stations like the one here in Sun Prairie, but across the country, barn raisings to build these new radio stations, and I've worked on a number of those, but then going outside the United States to see how people are making community radio with very, very little, sometimes no regular electricity. We were in Senegal a couple of years ago, and we had to go to the market to find the pieces to make an antenna.
Do you have that recipe for us that we can borrow?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is actually, that might be Senegal there in that picture. Community radio movement is growing, and each station, of course, is unique to the community that it lives in. But the idea of community radio is taking off around the world. So you've seen hundreds of new stations come online in Africa over the past decade, particularly now in North Africa since the Arab Spring. A lot of new community radio. I was just in Tunisia a couple of weeks ago working with some young volunteers that have their own community radio station now that was illegal before their uprising in 2010, 2011. In Tunisia, you could go to jail for broadcasting community radio, and now they have their own station. In Latin America, community radio has really taken off and is very well established. The first community radio stations began in Bolivia with the tin miners in the late 1940s, 1949.
Okay.
A network of radio stations put together by the tin miners where they broadcast union meetings and did radio theater and literacy classes and so on. You have places like El Salvador where the former guerrilla radio stations have now been turned into community radio.
Wow.
And people are delivering information about health, working to combat the issues of drugs and so on in their communities.
Just a quick aside. I'm sorry, we're running out of time. We're going to have to bring you back later. But one of the last photos we put up, Mara, if you can maybe just bring that in briefly. Just want to point out, this is a good friend of yours, Amy Goodman.
That is Amy Goodman, founder and host of Democracy Now!,
And
the wonderful...
This gentleman next to him who looks sort of familiar. Why would that be?
That's my father, who was at a book event of hers in Seattle a couple of years ago. And Amy Goodman is an amazing example of a community radio journalist who goes really to the ground where people are being affected by the policies, and she brings back those stories on radio, television, the internet, much like the Sun Prairie Community Media Center here is able to do, to bring together now with this new radio station the idea of radio, internet, television, all coming together to create a media that is available to all the people.
So just a couple minutes to spare. I don't know if we talked about it explicitly, but low power FM is this new opportunity the FCC has presented to local communities.
That's right, low power FM radio. The first idea came in 1999. It was fleshed out. There was a window for applications, and then now most recently, a year or so ago, the Local Community Radio Act was passed, which allowed the creation of even more low power stations like the one here in Sun Prairie. The idea is a small community radio station that serves a small local community.
And I believe all low power FMs have to be nonprofit, is that correct?
Nonprofit, non-commercial stations,
as we will be, obviously.
They serve a very specific geographic area. And so when we talk about community radio, it really is a very local idea. What are the needs of the people in your listening area?
Jeff, I think it's part of the plan to have this also stream and the programs be podcasts, so a potentially wider audience beyond your broadcast signal.
Right. I mean, we talk about community radio, but with the beauty of the internet, we'll be around. Our signal will be available throughout the world. So it's really going to be a great.
We wish you the best of luck, and we're happy to help out as we.
Well, that's great. I was really happy to meet you and talk with you a little bit today. So thanks, Norm. I really appreciate it.
Well,
thanks for having me on, John.
Oh, you're very welcome. And as Norm knows, the two of us have worked in the media reform movement. There's just all kinds of possibilities, as you talked about. These cross media, pollination, I guess, in terms of getting things out there in multiple media. So we'll have to have you back on and have more discussions about this, previewing more about what's going to be happening with the radio station as we get closer to the time. So thank you again,
Thanks,
Jeff
John.
Robbins, Norm Stockwell. Thanks, Norm, for a great show today. And again, if you have any questions or comments, feedback, forwardforum@aol.com, or just contact us here at the Sun Prairie Media Center. This has been Forward Forum. We'll see you next week.